The last time my stepmother laid a hand on me, it was not because I crashed a car. It was because I took the last slice of pizza when I was 20 years old. 10 years later, I walked into a ballroom with my own company, and my cousin whispered a sentence that changed everything. If you have ever been punished for claiming a small piece of happiness, stay with me. By the end, you will understand why I am never afraid to take the last slice anymore. My name is Lauren West. I am 30 years old, and tonight, I am standing in a ballroom that smells of expensive perfume and old money. The grand ballroom of the Harborview City Hotel is a cavern of gold leaf and crystal, the kind of place where the air conditioning is set to a temperature that suggests nobody inside has ever had to worry about a heating bill. I am the CEO and founder of Nourish Flow Grid, a logistics platform that rescues millions of pounds of food every year. The press calls me a visionary, the board calls me a shark. But as the master of ceremonies taps the microphone to silence the room, I know exactly what I really am. I am the girl who was punished for being hungry. The MC is a man with a voice like melted butter. He is reciting my biography, or at least the sanitized version that fits on a pamphlet. He talks about how I built a technology empire from a laptop in a food pantry. He mentions my resilience. He uses words like grit and determination. He does not know that the entire foundation of my life, every line of code I ever wrote, and every truck I ever routed, was built on the memory of cheap pepperoni and cold cheese. In my head, a phrase repeats itself like a broken record: the last slice. It is a funny thing about trauma. It does not care that you are wearing a charcoal silk gown that was tailored in Milan. It does not care that your driver is waiting outside in a black SUV. It waits for the quiet moments. It waits for the silence between the applause. And right now, as 500 people turn their faces toward the stage to look at me, all I can see is a cardboard box on a laminate countertop in a kitchen in Ohio, 10 years ago. I instinctively reach for my left wrist. My thumb traces the thin, jagged white line that runs parallel to the vein. I usually wear a watch to cover it, a heavy platinum timepiece that signals authority. But tonight, I left the watch at home. Tonight, the scar is part of the statement. It is a faded roadmap to the night I learned that love in my family was a finite resource, and I had taken more than my share just by existing. The scar came from a broken ceramic plate. I was 20 years old. I had worked a double shift. I was starving. I took the last piece of pizza, and my stepmother decided that my hunger was an act of rebellion. I can still feel the sting of the slap, the shove, the crash of the plate, and the silence of my father standing there, watching me bleed. My phone buzzes against the palm of my hand, snapping me back to the present. I look down, shielding the screen from the photographers who are prowling the edges of the room like well-dressed wolves. The message is from Ava. I am at the back of the room. We really need to talk. My heart does a slow, painful somersault in my chest. Ava, my cousin, the only person from that life who ever looked at me like I was a human being and not a piece of furniture. We have not spoken in person in years, though I know she follows my life through the headlines. Ava was there that night. She was asleep in the guest room, or so I thought. I look up, my eyes scanning the sea of tuxedos and evening gowns. The lighting is dim, designed to flatter the donors, but my vision has always been sharp. I trained myself to notice details. I trained myself to read the room because, in the house I grew up in, misreading the room could cost you a meal or a night of sleep. I see her. Ava is standing near the double doors, clutching a clutch bag that looks a little too worn for this crowd. She looks terrified. She's looking at me with an intensity that burns through the distance between us. But then, my gaze shifts slightly to the left, and the breath catches in my throat. They are here. My father, Rick, and my stepmother, Danielle. I have not seen them since the night they threw me out with a bleeding wrist and $20 in my pocket. 10 years have passed, and time has not been kind to them, but it has not humbled them either. Rick looks smaller, his shoulders hunched in a suit that fits him poorly around the neck. His hair is thinner, gone completely gray. But it is Danielle who draws my eye. She is wearing a dress that is trying too hard to be elegant, a stiff blue fabric that clashes with the muted tones of the room. Her face is etched with deeper lines around the mouth, lines carved by years of pursing her lips in disapproval. They are not looking at the stage. They are looking at the waiters circling with trays of hors d'oeuvres. They look out of place, uncomfortable, and yet there is that familiar gleam in Danielle's eyes as she surveys the wealth around her. It is a look of entitlement mixed with resentment. It is the look she used to give me when I got an A on a report card, as if my success was something I had stolen from her own son, Landon. Why are they here? I did not invite them. I made sure their names were on the exclusion list. But this is a fundraising gala, and tickets were open to the public if you had the donation fee. $500 a plate, a sum that, 10 years ago, would have felt like a fortune to them, a sum they would never have spent on me. My instinct is to run. The flight response is hardwired into my nervous system. I could turn around, walk out the backstage exit, get into my car, and disappear. I have enough money to never see them again. I have enough power to have security escort them out quietly. I could protect the pristine, safe life I have built. But then I look at the banner hanging above the stage. Huge, bold letters projected in light. The Last Slice Initiative. That is the name of the new fund I am launching tonight. My marketing team fought me on it. They said it sounded too aggressive, too specific. They wanted to call it the West Foundation for Hunger Relief or something equally benign. I refused. I told them that hunger is specific. Hunger is looking at the last piece of food on the table and knowing you are not allowed to touch it. This initiative is designed to route surplus food from corporate events and high-end restaurants directly to after-school programs for at-risk youth. It is for the kids who are standing in a kitchen right now, wondering if they are allowed to eat. I cannot leave. If I leave, I am just the girl at the bus stop again. If I stay, I am the woman who owns the table. I take a deep breath, smoothing the silk of my dress. I signal to the waiter to bring me a glass of water, just to give my hands something to do. Ava sees me looking and starts to move through the crowd. She is weaving between the tables, dodging the wealthy donors who are busy congratulating themselves on their generosity. When she reaches me, she does not hug me. We are not that kind of family anymore. The air between us is thick with the things we have not said for a decade. She looks older, tired. There are dark circles under her eyes that makeup cannot hide. "Lauren," she whispers. Her voice is shaking. "Hello, Ava," I say. My voice is steady. It is the voice I use for board meetings. It is a shield. "You made it." "I did not come for the food," she says, glancing nervously over her shoulder toward where my father and stepmother are standing. "They do not know I am talking to you. They think we are just here to see if the rumors about your money were true." I take a sip of water. Of course. They are here to count my money. They are here to see if there is a way to guilt me into opening the vault. I expected that. I prepared for that. "Go back to them. Ava," I say coldly, "I have a speech to give." "No," she says, and she grabs my arm. Her grip is tight, desperate. She pulls me slightly away from the earshot of a passing waiter. "Lauren, listen to me. After this speech, I am going to show you something." I frown, pulling my arm back. "Show me what?" "You deserve to know what really happened the night you were kicked out," she says. Her eyes are wide. Swimming with tears, she is fighting back. "It was not just about the pizza. It was never just about the pizza." I freeze. The ballroom seems to tilt slightly on its axis. For 10 years, I have replayed that night in my head. I have analyzed every second of it, the accusations, the violence, the way my father looked at the floor while his wife threw my coat at me. I thought I knew the whole story. I thought the story was simply that they did not love me. "What are you talking about?" I ask, my voice dropping to a hiss. "I have footage," Ava whispers, "and I found documents. Mom had an old file box in the attic. Lauren, they lied to you. They stole from you." The music from the stage swells. The MC is winding up his introduction. "Please welcome the woman who is changing the way America eats, Ms. Lauren West." The applause starts. It is a thunderous sound, rolling over me like a wave. Ava steps back, her hands raised in a gesture of surrender. "Do your speech," she says. "Kill it, but find me afterward. Do not let them leave without knowing that you know." She turns and melts back into the shadows of the room. I am left standing alone in the spotlight, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I walk up the stairs to the stage. The lights are blinding. I cannot see my father's face anymore, but I know he is out there. I know he is clapping. I wonder if he is proud, or if he is calculating how much a lawsuit might be worth. I step up to the podium. I grip the edges of the lectern so hard my knuckles turn white. I look out into the black void beyond the lights. I imagine the camera is rolling, broadcasting this to the world. I am supposed to give a speech about logistics. I am supposed to talk about supply chains and expiration dates and tax write-offs for charitable giving. That is the speech written on the teleprompter. But I am not going to give that speech. I look straight into the lens of the camera at the back of the room. I imagine I am looking at you. Yes, you, the one listening to this. I promised I would tell you everything. I promised I would explain why I am never afraid to take the last slice anymore. To do that, I cannot start with the company. I cannot start with the millions of dollars or the awards or this gray silk dress. I have to go back to the beginning. I have to take you back to a small town in Ohio, to a house that looked perfectly normal from the street, and to a kitchen that smelled of pepperoni and betrayal. I have to tell you about the night my life shattered into 1,000 pieces, and how I picked up the sharpest shard and used it to cut my way out. Stay with me. The speech can wait. The truth cannot. To understand how a person ends up alone at a bus stop with a bleeding wrist, you cannot just look at the explosion. You have to look at the slow, quiet laying of the fuse. For me, that fuse was laid in Maple Glen, Ohio, a town that looked exactly like the backdrop of a soda commercial. It was a place of wide driveways, manicured lawns that smelled of cut grass and gasoline on Saturday mornings, and houses that were built with good intentions and vinyl siding. We lived in a 2-story colonial on a street called Sycamore Lane, though there were no sycamores, just polite maples that turned a brilliant, burning red in October. From the outside, the West family was the very picture of the American dream. My father, Rick, worked in insurance, a job that required him to be steady and predictable. My mother, Julia, was the warmth of that house. She was the one who hung wind chimes on the back porch and made sure there was always a fresh loaf of banana bread on the counter. But when I was 9 years old, cancer moved into our house, and 6 months later, my mother moved out, leaving behind a silence so loud it made my ears ring. For 2 years, it was just Dad and me. We existed in a sort of gray stasis. We ate takeout. We watched television without really seeing it. I learned to be quiet because I thought if I made too much noise, I might break him. I became the ghost in my own hallway, tiptoeing around his grief, trying to be the perfect, invisible daughter. Then, when I was 11, the silence broke. Rick met Danielle. Danielle was a realtor for a local agency called Heritage Homes. She was beautiful in a very specific, managed way. Her hair was always sprayed into a stiff, golden helmet that never moved in the wind. Her lipstick was always a shade of aggressive coral. She knew how to stage a house to make it sell, how to bake cookies before an open house to mask the smell of damp, how to arrange furniture to make a small room look grand. I did not realize until much later that she applied the same logic to people. She staged us. She moved in 6 months after their first date, and she brought Landon with her. Landon was her son from a previous marriage, exactly my age to the month. If I was the ghost, Landon was the brass band. He was loud, athletic, and possessed a golden retriever energy that demanded attention every second of the day. He threw his backpack on the floor. He shouted when he laughed, and he took up space. He took up so much space that I found myself pressing my back against the walls just to let him pass. The abuse, if you could even call it that back then, was not a shout. It was a whisper. It was a slow reconfiguration of the household architecture until I was structural support, and Landon was the facade. It started with the bedrooms. My room, the one I had grown up in with the window facing the oak tree, was deemed better suited for Landon because he needed space for his sports trophies and his drum set. Danielle explained it to me with a smile that did not quite reach her eyes. She said that since I was such a reader, I would probably prefer the smaller guest room at the back of the house. It was cozy, she said. It was quieter. I moved my books into the box room that used to be a sewing den. I did not complain. I was 11, and I had been trained that being good meant being agreeable. Over dinner, the dynamic solidified. Dinner in the West household was a production. Danielle insisted on it. We sat at the mahogany table, and she would ask about our days. Landon would talk for 20 minutes about soccer practice, about a joke a friend made, about a video game he wanted. He spoke with his mouth full, and Danielle would watch him with a rapturous expression, as if he were delivering the State of the Union address. "Landon is a natural leader," she would say to my father, placing a hand on his arm. "Look at how much energy he has. He is going to be the star of the middle school team." My father would nod, smiling a tired but genuine smile. He liked the noise. He liked that the house felt alive again, even if the life was sucking the air out of the room for everyone else. "And how was your day, Lauren?" Dad would ask eventually, usually when the plates were half empty. I got an A on my history essay. I would say, "That is nice." Danielle would interrupt, her voice bright and dismissive. "Oh, Rick, did I tell you the dishwasher is making that noise again? We really need to look at the budget for a new one. Also, Landon needs new cleats for the season opener." And just like that, my A was gone. It was swept off the table like crumbs, replaced by the immediate, pressing needs of the golden boy. I was the easy child. That was the label they gave me. I overheard Danielle telling the neighbors at a block party once. "Lauren is such a blessing," she said, swirling her white wine. "So low maintenance. I never have to worry about her. She just stays in her room and reads. Landon, though, he is a handful, but that is just because he has so much spirit. Boys need that fire." Low maintenance. It sounded like a compliment. In reality, it was a sentence. It meant that because I did not demand things, I did not get them. It became a pattern of small, sharp subtractions. When school shopping came around in August, Landon got the brand-name jeans and the sneakers that were popular that year. Danielle said it was important for his confidence, that he needed to fit in with the team. When it was my turn, she would sigh and look at the receipt. "Money is a little tight this month, honey," she would say, her brow furrowing in a performance of financial stress. "You do not mind if we just get your basics at the discount mart, do you? You are not flashy anyway. You have such natural taste. You can make anything look good." I wore the stiff, uncool jeans. I wore the generic sneakers. And I told myself it did not matter. I told myself I was helping the family. But then there was the bicycle. The summer we turned 13, Landon wanted a mountain bike, a specific one with 21 gears and shock absorbers. It cost $300, a fortune. My father hesitated. "We really should be saving for the roof repairs," he said. "Oh, Rick, look at him," Danielle pleaded. "He needs to get out and burn off that energy. It is an investment in his health. Besides, he is growing so fast." They bought the bike. 2 weeks later, my birthday arrived. I had asked for a used laptop I had seen in the classifieds for $150. I wanted to learn how to type properly. I wanted to explore the internet, which was just starting to become a household thing. Danielle handed me a small, wrapped box. Inside was a set of scented lotions and a journal. We looked at the computer. "Sweetie," she said, smoothing my hair, "but it is just so expensive right now after getting the bike, and honestly, you spend too much time inside as it is. Maybe next year, or maybe we can look at it for Christmas." Next year, next summer, next time, the horizon of my needs was always receding, while Landon's desires were met in the present tense. The only person who saw the invisible lines being drawn was Ava. Ava was my cousin on my mother's side. She lived 3 towns over, but she came to stay with us for a weekend once a month. She was the same age as us. but she had a sharpness to her that I lacked. She had eyes that missed nothing. One Saturday night, we were in the kitchen. I was standing at the sink, scrubbing the lasagna pan. The burnt cheese was stuck hard, and the water was scalding my hands. In the living room, the television was blaring. Landon and my father were watching a game. Danielle was on the sofa, flipping through a magazine. Ava walked into the kitchen and leaned against the counter. She watched me scrub for a long moment. "Why are you doing the dishes?" she asked. "It is my chore," I said, not looking up. Ava frowned. "Landon ate 3 pieces of lasagna. You had 1 small square, and he is sitting in there watching football while you are scrubbing his crust off the pan." "He has practice tomorrow," I recited, repeating the script Danielle had drilled into me. "He needs to rest." Ava made a noise that sounded like a scoff. "That is garbage. Lauren, you know that, right? He is not a professional athlete. He is 13. He can wash a fork." "Shh," I hissed, looking fearfully toward the living room. "It is fine. I do not mind." "You should mind," Ava whispered fiercely. "They treat you like you are the hired help. Does your dad not see it?" "Dad is tired," I said. "He just wants peace." "Peace comes at your expense," Ava said. She grabbed a towel and started drying the plates I was handing her. She did not say anything else, but the way she slammed the plates into the cupboard made her feelings clear. It was Ava who pushed me to find an escape that Danielle could not touch. Since I could not get the computer at home, I went to the Maple Glen Public Library. It was a brick building on Main Street that smelled of dust, lemon polish, and old paper. It was my sanctuary. It was the one place where nobody asked me to be smaller. They had a row of 4 computers in the back. They were bulky, beige machines with heavy monitors that hummed when you turned them on. The internet connection was slow, screeching and wailing as it connected over the phone line. But to me, it was the sound of freedom. I started going there every day after school. I told Danielle I had joined a book club. She was relieved. It meant she did not have to pick me up until 5 o'clock. At the library, I discovered a world that made sense. I found books on basic programming. I learned about logic gates. I learned that computers were not like families. In a computer, the rules were absolute. If you wrote the code correctly, the program ran. If you made a mistake, it failed. It did not matter if the code was wearing designer jeans or generic ones. It did not matter if the code was loud or quiet. It only mattered if it was right. I became obsessed. I taught myself HTML. I started learning the basics of Python from a thick, dog-eared manual I found on the bottom shelf. I built simple websites. I created spreadsheets to organize imaginary data. I found a peace in the blinking cursor that I never found at the dinner table on Sycamore Lane. One afternoon, Ava came to pick me up at the library. Her mom was driving us back to her house for the weekend. She found me at the back computer, typing furiously. "What is all this?" she asked, peering over my shoulder at the lines of green text on the black screen. "I am trying to build a sorting algorithm," I said, my eyes burning from staring at the screen for 2 hours. "It organizes data based on priority. See? If I input a list of numbers, it rearranges them from lowest to highest automatically." Ava watched the screen as I hit enter. The messy list of numbers instantly snapped into a perfect, orderly column. She looked at me, and for the first time, I saw a look of genuine awe on her face. "You made it do that?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, feeling a flush of pride. "It is simple, really." "Lauren," she said, leaning in, "this is not simple. Landon is struggling to pass algebra. You are teaching a machine how to think." She looked around the dusty library, at the peeling paint on the walls, and the homeless man sleeping in the periodicals section. Then she looked back at me, her eyes fierce. "Let Danielle buy him the bikes and the shoes," Ava said. "Let him be the star of the middle school. You are building something else." "What am I building?" I asked, feeling small in my oversized thrift store sweater. Ava tapped the screen, right on the line of code I had just written. "You are building a way out," she said. "You are going to own something big one day, and when you do, none of them will be able to touch it." I laughed it off at the time, I was 14 years old. I had no money, no computer of my own, and a stepmother who made me feel like a burden for eating a second serving of mashed potatoes. The idea of owning anything, let alone something big, felt like a fantasy. But Ava's words planted a seed. As high school approached, the divide in the house grew wider. Landon became the varsity athlete, the social king of the hallway. Danielle's entire personality revolved around his game schedule and his social calendar. I became the shadow. I was the one who fixed the printer when it jammed. I was the one who set the VCR to record Landon's games. I was the utility player in their lives, necessary for function, but unworthy of praise. I remember one Christmas when I was 16. I had spent months hinting that I needed a graphing calculator for my advanced calculus class. It was expensive, nearly $100. Danielle made a big show of saying they would see what Santa brought. Christmas morning came. Landon tore open box after box. A new gaming console, a leather jacket, tickets to a concert in the city. I opened my main gift. It was a sweater, a nice sweater. Sure, but just a sweater. And inside the pocket was a $20 gift card to the cinema. I must have looked disappointed, just for a second, because Danielle pounced. "Oh, honey, do not look so glum," she said, sipping her mimosa. We thought about the calculator, but Landon really needed the console for his hand-eye coordination. It is good for his sports. Besides, you are so smart. Lauren, you can do the math in your head. Can you not? My father chuckled, finding this amusing. "Yeah, you are our little genius," he said. "You do not need a fancy machine to help you." I looked at the sweater. It was pink. I hated pink. Danielle knew I hated pink. That was the moment I stopped asking. I realized that to them, my intelligence was not a gift to be nurtured. It was an excuse to give me less. If I was smart, I did not need help. If I was capable, I did not need support. They used my own competence as a weapon against me. I went back to the library the next day. I downloaded a calculator emulator on the public computer and did my calculus homework there. I did not tell them. I did not complain. I just solved the problem. And as I typed the numbers, watching the logic hold true while my family life made no sense, I thought of Ava. You are building a way out. I did not know it then, but the last slice incident was already inevitable. The stage was set. I was the intruder in their perfect picture, the variable that did not fit their equation. They were just waiting for an excuse to delete me from the program. And I was just waiting for the courage to write my own code. The acceptance letter to Lakewood State University arrived in a thin, white envelope. It was not the thick, celebratory packet that the wealthy kids in my high school received from private colleges on the East Coast. It was a single sheet of paper stating that I had been accepted into the data science program with a partial academic scholarship. It covered 60% of my tuition. To me, that 60% felt like a lifeline. To my father and stepmother, the remaining 40% looked like a bill they had no intention of paying. We sat at the kitchen table to discuss my future. Danielle had a calculator out, tapping the buttons with the eraser end of a pencil. "Well, it is wonderful that you got in." "Lauren," she said, her voice tight, "really, we are so proud. But you have to understand the reality here. We have Landon's community college tuition to think about, and the market is soft right now. We cannot just pull money out of thin air." "I know," I said, staring at my hands. "I can take out loans for the rest, and I will work." "Good," Danielle said, closing the folder. "That is the responsible thing to do. And of course, since you cannot afford the dormitory fees, you will stay here. It makes the most sense. Why pay for a bed when you have a perfectly good one right here?" She smiled then, a tight stretching of lips over teeth. "But," she added, raising a finger, "we need to set some ground rules. You are an adult now. Lauren, 18. If you are living under this roof, you are not a child anymore. You are a tenant." A tenant. The word hung in the air, cold and transactional. "We will not charge you rent," she continued, generous as a queen bestowing a favor, "but you will need to earn your keep. The house cleaning, the laundry, and dinner prep on weeknights, it is only fair. We are supporting you, so you support the household." I nodded. It seemed logical at the time. I did not realize until months later that supporting the household actually meant becoming the live-in maid, so Danielle could focus on her career and Landon could focus on finding himself. That fall, my life became a study in exhaustion. Lakewood State was a 45-minute drive from Maple Glen. Since I did not have a car, that drive turned into a 2-hour ordeal involving a ride from a neighbor to the town center, a county bus to the transit hub, and a campus shuttle to the university. I would leave the house at 6 in the morning, my backpack heavy with textbooks and my lunch packed in Tupperware I had washed myself the night before. I spent 4 hours a day in transit. I read my textbooks on the bus, highlighting paragraphs as the vehicle shuddered over potholes, trying to absorb statistics and Python code while the person next to me coughed or played loud music. Landon, meanwhile, had a different start to his morning. 2 weeks before classes started, my father drove a used silver sedan into the driveway. It was not new, but it was solid. Leather seats, working air conditioning, a sunroof. I stood on the porch, watching Rick dangle the keys in front of Landon's grinning face. "For me?" Landon asked, looking like he had won the lottery. "You need to get to classes, son," Rick said, slapping him on the back. "And you have got practice. Can't have you relying on rides. You are a man now. You need wheels." I waited for them to come inside. I waited for my father to look at me, to explain why Landon, whose community college was only 15 minutes away, needed a car, while I was navigating a tri-county transit map just to get to my morning lecture. Rick found me in the kitchen later, pouring a glass of water. He looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "I know what you are thinking, Lauren," he said, avoiding my eyes. "Do you?" I asked. "Look, Landon, he needs a little push," Rick said. "He struggles with motivation. If we make it hard for him, he will just quit. You know how he is." "And I don't struggle?" I asked quietly. "You?" Rick laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "You are the rock, Lauren. You are tough. You figure things out. You always have. Landon needs help to get to the starting line. You are already running the race." It was a compliment designed to silence me. By framing my neglect as a testament to my strength, he absolved himself of the guilt of unfairness. I was the responsible one, so I did not need resources. Landon was the fragile one, so he required investment. So I took the bus, and I worked. I found a job at a sandwich shop near the university campus. It was a chaotic, grease-smelling franchise where the lunch rush felt like a combat zone. The manager was a frantic man named Steve, who did the scheduling on sticky notes and constantly ran out of ingredients because he ordered based on gut feeling rather than data. I needed the money. Danielle had made it clear that while I lived rent-free, everything else, textbooks, clothes, bus fare, food outside the house, was my problem. One slow Tuesday afternoon, while wiping down the counter, I watched Steve panic over a shortage of provolone cheese. "I can fix that for you," I said. "Fix the cheese?" Steve snapped. "Unless you can milk a cow in the back, you can't fix it." "No, the ordering," I said. I pulled a folded piece of paper from my apron. "I have been tracking the sales for the last 3 weeks. We always run out of provolone on Tuesdays because the turkey special is on Monday and people want the upgrade, but we overorder roast beef by 20% every Thursday." Steve looked at the paper. I had drawn a simple graph, hand-plotted, showing the consumption curves. "If you shift the order to Monday morning and cut the roast beef, you save about $80 a week in waste and you never run out of cheese," I explained. Steve blinked. He looked at me, then at the paper, then back at me. He did not say thank you. He just grunted and took the paper. But the next week, he changed the order, and the week after that, he let me input the schedule into an Excel spreadsheet on the back office computer. It was a small victory. It was the first time I realized that the way my brain worked, seeing patterns where others saw chaos, had value. It was the first time I realized that logistics was not just about moving things, it was about predicting needs before they became emergencies. But back at the house on Sycamore Lane, my value was measured differently. My day usually ended around 8 or 9 at night. I would stumble through the front door, smelling of sandwich oil and bus exhaust, only to find the kitchen in disarray. Danielle would be in the living room, watching a reality show. "Oh, you are home," she would call out, not turning her head. "There is some chicken left in the fridge if you are hungry. And sweetie, could you load the dishwasher?" Landon made a protein shake and left the blender out. "It is a sticky mess." I would walk into the kitchen. The sink would be piled high with dishes. The counters would be streaked with sauce. Landon would be upstairs in his room, playing video games, the sound of explosions vibrating through the ceiling. I would put down my backpack, roll up the sleeves of my uniform, and start scrubbing. "Are you grateful?" Danielle asked me once, standing in the doorway with a glass of wine while I wiped down the stove. "Grateful for what?" I asked, my back stiff. "For this," she said, gesturing vaguely at the house, "for having a safe place to land. So many college kids have to work 3 jobs just to pay rent. We are saving you thousands of dollars. Lauren, I hope you realize that." "I am grateful," I said automatically. It was the password required to end the conversation. "Good," she said, "because attitude is everything." The only person who saw through the fog was Ava. Ava had moved to the city, about 20 minutes from my university, to work as a paralegal. She was living in a studio apartment the size of a closet, but it was hers. We would meet for coffee on Saturday mornings, the only time I carved out for myself. We sat in a corner booth of a coffee shop that smelled of roasted beans and rain. Ava watched me pour 3 packets of sugar into my black coffee. "You look tired." "Lauren," she said, "not just sleepy tired, bone tired." "I have finals next week," I said, stirring the coffee. "And Steve wants me to close on Friday and open on Saturday." "It is not just the work," Ava said. "It is them." I shrugged. "It is free rent." "Ava, you know how much apartments cost. I can't afford to move out." "Is it free?" Ava asked. She leaned forward, her eyes intense. "You do the grocery shopping, right? With whose money?" "Dad gives me cash for the big trips," I said. "But if I pick up milk or eggs or bread on my way home—" "You pay for it," she finished. "And the gas for the mower? You pay for that too? And the cleaning supplies? It adds up to less than rent," I argued, though my voice lacked conviction. "Lauren," Ava said, lowering her voice, "you are not a tenant. You are a servant who pays for the privilege of scrubbing their toilets. Does anyone in that house actually see what you are doing? Does Rick even know you are top of your class?" "He knows," I said defensively. "I showed him my transcript." "And what did he say?" He said it was good that I didn't have to struggle like Landon." I admitted. Ava slammed her hand on the table. People turned to look, but she did not care. "Landon is failing remedial English. Lauren, he is failing. And they took him to dinner to celebrate his effort. You have a 4.0 GPA and you are scrubbing blender gunk off the counter. This isn't normal. This is gaslighting." "I know," I whispered. "I know, but I just have to get through 2 more years. Once I graduate, once I get a real job, I am gone. I will never look back." I truly believe that. I believed that if I just kept my head down, endured the unfairness, and optimized my survival like I optimized the sandwich shop inventory, I would eventually earn my freedom. I did not know that the timeline was not mine to control. The breaking point began to form on a Thursday evening in October of my sophomore year. I came home later than usual. The bus had broken down on the highway, and we had sat on the shoulder for 40 minutes waiting for a replacement. My phone was dead. I was hungry, cold, and dreading the calculus exam I had the next morning. When I walked up the driveway, I saw the house was blazing with light. Cars were parked along the curb. Danielle's friends, Rick's colleagues, a few of Landon's buddies. I opened the front door and was hit by a wall of noise and the smell of warm pepperoni. "Surprise!" someone shouted. but the cheer died down when they saw it was just me. Danielle came rushing over, looking flustered in a cocktail dress. "Where have you been?" she hissed, grabbing my arm and pulling me into the hallway. "We have been waiting for the ice for an hour." "What is going on?" I asked, dropping my heavy backpack on the floor. "Landon made the team," she squealed, her face suddenly transforming into a mask of joy as she looked back at the guests. "The Riverton Rovers. It is a semi-pro league." I looked past her into the living room. Landon was holding court in the center of the room, wearing a fresh jersey, a beer in one hand. He looked triumphant. "He passed the first round of tryouts," Dad corrected from the recliner. Though he was beaming, he still has to make the final cut next month. "It is basically a done deal," Danielle insisted. "The coach loves him." "So you threw a party?" I asked. "For a tryout?" "We are celebrating his potential," Danielle said sharply. "Now, stop standing there looking like a drowned rat. Go to the garage fridge and get more sodas. And check the pizzas in the oven. The timer went off 5 minutes ago." I stood there for a second. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell them that I had just aced a midterm that half the class failed. I wanted to tell them that I was hungry and tired, and that my potential was being ground into dust by their indifference. But I didn't. I was the good one. I was the easy one. I went to the kitchen. For the next 3 hours, I was invisible. I cut the pizzas. I refilled the chip bowls. I collected empty beer bottles and wiped up spills. I watched my father toast Landon's athletic prowess. I watched Danielle show off Landon's baby pictures to her friends, telling stories about how he was always destined for greatness. Nobody asked me how school was. Nobody asked me if I wanted a plate. I ate a cold crust that was left on a serving tray while standing over the trash can. Around 10 o'clock, the party started to wind down. The guests were leaving. Landon was sprawled on the sofa, laughing at something on his phone. Danielle was in the hallway saying goodbye to the neighbors. I was in the kitchen, tying up a massive black garbage bag filled with paper plates and half-eaten crusts. The smell was overwhelming. Rick walked in. He looked happy, a little tipsy. "Good night, kiddo," he said, patting me on the shoulder as he reached for a glass of water. "Thanks for helping out. Your mom really wanted this to be special for him." "She is not my mom," I wanted to say, but I just nodded. "He needs this confidence boost," Rick continued, almost to himself. "The world is tough on boys like him. He needs to know we are in his corner." I looked at my father. I looked at the man who had once taught me how to ride a bike, who had once held me when I cried over a scraped knee. I realized then that he did not see me anymore. He only saw the space I occupied, the utility I provided. I was a supporting character in the movie of Landon's life. I dragged the heavy garbage bag out the back door, into the cool night air. I walked to the curb and heaved it into the bin. I looked up at the moon. It was a sliver of white in the dark sky. 2 more years, I whispered to the empty street. Just 2 more years. I went back inside, washed my hands, and went to my small room. I put on my headphones to drown out the sound of Landon's video games, and I opened my calculus textbook. I studied until 2 in the morning. I studied because it was the only thing I could own. I studied because every equation I solved was a brick in the wall I was building between me and them. But as I fell asleep that night, dreaming of spreadsheets and silence, I did not know that the countdown had accelerated. I did not know that the final explosion was not years away, but just around the corner, waiting inside a cardboard box from Pizza Hut. The dynamic in the house had shifted from neglect to active resentment. Danielle had tasted the high of being the mother of the star athlete, even if the stardom was imaginary. Anything that detracted from that narrative, like my quiet presence, my silent judgment, or my hunger, was becoming an offense. I was 20 years old, I was an adult, and I was about to learn that in the West household, adulthood did not grant you rights. It only gave them permission to stop pretending they cared. The date was November 14th. I remember it because the wind cutting through the gap in the front door frame was particularly biting, and my hands were so numb I fumbled with my keys for a solid minute before I could turn the lock. I was 20 years old. I was not a child. I was a junior in college. standing 5 feet 7 inches tall, wearing a uniform from the sandwich shop that smelled of stale oregano and dish soap. I had been awake since 6 in the morning. I had attended 3 lectures, taken a midterm exam in advanced statistics, and worked a 6-hour shift where I stood on my feet without a break because 2 other employees had called in sick. My bank account had exactly $12.40 in it. My stomach was a hollow, aching cavern that had been growling since noon. The house on Sycamore Lane was quiet when I stepped inside. The lights in the hallway were off, but the blue glow of the television flickered from the upstairs landing. I could hear the canned laughter of a sitcom. They were all up there. Rick, Danielle, Landon, relaxing in the warmth, digested and comfortable. I dropped my heavy backpack by the door. My shoulders screamed in protest as the weight left them. I walked into the kitchen, not expecting a welcome, just hoping for calories. The kitchen was a wreck. It was not unusual, but tonight it felt personal. There were dirty plates stacked in the sink, encrusted with tomato sauce. There were crumpled napkins on the floor. And in the center of the island, like a monument to their indifference, sat a large cardboard pizza box. I walked over to it. I did not want to hope. Hope was dangerous in this house. I lifted the lid. 1 slice. There was exactly 1 slice of pepperoni pizza left. It was cold. The cheese had congealed into that opaque, waxy state that happens when pizza sits out for 3 hours. The pepperoni was curled and greasy. To anyone else, it might have looked unappetizing. To me, it looked like salvation. I stood there for a moment, staring at it. My brain did the math. If I ate this, I could skip breakfast tomorrow and save $3. I could make it to my afternoon shift without feeling dizzy. I looked toward the ceiling, toward the sounds of the TV. "Is anyone saving this?" I called out. My voice was not loud, but it carried in the quiet house. I waited. 1 second, 2 seconds, 5 seconds. No answer. Just the muffled sound of a commercial jingle and Landon laughing at something. Silence was permission. That was the rule of the house. If they wanted it, they would have taken it. I reached into the box. The crust was stiff. I did not bother with a plate. I did not want to make another dish that I would inevitably have to wash. I just wanted to eat. I lifted the slice to my mouth, my salivary glands firing in painful anticipation. The kitchen door swung open. It was Danielle. She was wearing a silk robe, her face scrubbed clean of makeup, her hair wrapped in a towel. She stopped dead in the doorway. Her eyes went from my face to the pizza in my hand, and then to the empty box. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Did you just take the last slice without asking?" she asked. Her voice was low, dangerous. It was not a question. It was an indictment. I lowered the pizza slightly, my heart hammering a sudden, violent rhythm against my ribs. I swallowed, my throat dry. I called out. I said, my voice steady despite the fear. I asked if anyone was saving it. Nobody answered. "You whispered?" Danielle snapped, walking into the room. She moved like a predator, closing the distance between us. "You whispered because you wanted to steal it. You knew Landon would want that for a midnight snack. He has practice in the morning. He needs the protein." I looked at her. I looked at this woman who had lived in my house for 9 years, who had slept in my mother's bedroom, who had spent my father's money on pedicures while I taped my textbooks together because the bindings were falling apart. Landon ate an entire large pizza by himself. I said, "I saw the other box in the trash. I have not eaten since lunch." "That is not my problem," Danielle said, her face twisting into a sneer. "You are an adult. Lauren, you have a job. Buy your own food. That pizza was bought with household funds. It belongs to the family." "I am family," I said. The words hung there, fragile and heavy. Danielle laughed. It was a sharp barking sound. "You are a leech. Lauren, you live here for free. You use our water, our heat, our electricity, and now you think you are entitled to take the food out of my son's mouth? You are selfish. That is what you are, selfish and ungrateful." My father walked in then. Rick was wearing his pajamas, looking sleepy and annoyed at the disturbance. "What is going on?" he asked, rubbing his eyes. I can hear you two from upstairs. She is stealing Landon's food, Danielle said, pointing a manicured finger at me. After everything we do for her, after we let her stay here when she should be out on her own, she takes the last slice without a second thought. Rick looked at me. He looked at the pizza in my hand. He did not ask me if I was hungry. He did not ask me how my exam went. Lauren, put it back, he said wearily. Just put it back. Landon mentioned he might want it later. Something inside me snapped. It was not a loud snap. It was the quiet, final sound of a cable fraying until the last thread gave way. I was 20 years old. I was on the dean's list. I managed the inventory for a business. And I was standing in my childhood kitchen being told to put down a piece of cold pepperoni like a naughty toddler. No, I said. The word surprised all of us. Rick blinked. Danielle's mouth fell open slightly. Excuse me? Danielle said, stepping closer. She was now well inside my personal space. I could smell her expensive face cream. I said no. I repeated. My hand was shaking. But I did not put the pizza down. I gave you $300 from my paycheck last week for groceries. I paid for half of this pizza. I earned this, and I'm going to eat it. The defiance hit Danielle like a physical blow. She was not used to resistance. She was used to the ghost, the shadow, the girl who said sorry and thank you and scrubbed the pans. You little brat, she hissed. She lunged. It happened fast, a blur of motion that my tired brain could barely track. Danielle reached out and slapped the pizza out of my hand. Her hand struck my wrist hard. The slice flew sideways, landing face down on the white linoleum. The sauce splattered against the cabinet, a bright, violent red smear. Oops, a voice said from the doorway. I looked over. Landon was leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed, wearing a smirk that made my blood boil. He had watched the whole thing. He was enjoying it. Look what you made me do! Danielle screamed. She was vibrating with rage now. Her face flushed pink. Look at this mess. Clean it up. I looked at the pizza on the floor, my dinner, my 12 hours of work, my hunger. I looked up at her, and for the first time in my life, I looked at her with pure, unfiltered hatred. You are crazy, I said. My voice was trembling. You are actually crazy over a piece of bread and cheese. Danielle's eyes went wide. She lost it. She stepped forward and swung her hand. Her palm connected with my cheek with a cracking sound that echoed off the tile walls. My head snapped to the side. The sting was immediate, hot and blinding. But she did not stop there. In her momentum, she shoved me. Get out of my face, she screamed. She shoved me hard, 2 hands against my chest. I was not expecting it. I was off balance. I stumbled backward. My feet tangled in the rug by the sink. I fell. My arms flailed out to catch myself. My left hand came down hard on the counter, sweeping across the surface as I went down. There was a ceramic decorative plate sitting there, one of those ugly, hand-painted things Danielle collected. My hand hit it. The plate shattered. I hit the floor hard, my hip bone colliding with the cabinet. Pain shot up my side. But the real pain was in my wrist. I sat up, dazed, gasping for air. I looked at my left hand. A jagged triangle of the ceramic plate, sharp as a scalpel, had sliced across the inside of my wrist. It was a deep, ugly gash. For a second, there was nothing, just the white of the dermis. Then, the blood came. It welled up dark and fast, spilling over the heel of my hand, dripping onto the white linoleum, mixing with the tomato sauce from the fallen pizza. Oh God, I whispered. I grabbed my wrist with my other hand, squeezing tight, but the blood oozed between my fingers. It was warm and sticky. The room went silent. Danielle stood over me, her chest heaving. She looked at the blood. She did not look horrified. She looked annoyed. Great, she spat. Now you are bleeding everywhere. I looked at my father. Dad, I said. My voice sounded small, like I was 9 years old again. Dad, I am hurt. Rick stood there. He looked at the blood pooling on the floor. He looked at his wife, who was fuming. He looked at his son. who had stopped smiling but did not move to help. Rick looked at me, and in his eyes, I saw the truth. I was not his daughter anymore. I was a complication. I was a problem that needed to be solved so he could go back to sleep. If you do not like how things are in this house, Lauren, he said, his voice cold and flat, you can leave. I stared at him. The blood was dripping onto my uniform pants. What? I choked out. You heard him, Danielle said. She seemed to seize on the opening. She marched to the hallway closet. I heard the sound of hangers clattering. She came back holding my winter coat, the old one with the broken zipper. She grabbed my backpack from where I had dropped it. You are always complaining, she said, throwing the coat at me. It landed on my head, heavy and suffocating. You are always playing the victim. Well, we are done. We are done with the drama. She threw the backpack. It hit me in the chest with a heavy thud. Get up, she commanded. I struggled to my feet, clutching my bleeding wrist. I felt dizzy. The room was spinning slightly. Where am I supposed to go? I asked. It is 10 at night. I am bleeding. Danielle reached into the pocket of her robe. She pulled out a crumpled bill. She grabbed my bloody hand, ignoring the wound, and jammed the paper into my palm. $20. You wanted independence? She sneered, her face inches from mine. Congratulations. You are independent. Now get out. She grabbed my arm, the uninjured one, and dragged me toward the back door. I was too shocked to fight. I was 20 years old, but in that moment, the power dynamic was so absolute that I felt powerless. She opened the door. The cold November air hit me like a physical slap, freezing the tears that were starting to form in my eyes. Don't come back until you learn some respect, she said. She shoved me. I stumbled out onto the concrete patio steps. The door slammed shut. The deadbolt clicked. I stood there in the dark. I was wearing a thin uniform shirt and pants. My coat was in my hand, not on my body. My backpack was at my feet, and my left wrist was throbbing in time with my heartbeat, soaking the crumpled $20 bill I was clutching. I was alone, but I was not entirely unobserved. Inside the house, in the shadows of the hallway leading to the downstairs guest bathroom, a figure had been watching. Ava had come over that afternoon to drop off some old books for me and had decided to crash on the sofa because her car was making a funny noise. She had woken up when the yelling started. She had stood in the dark, invisible to Rick and Danielle and Landon, and she had held up her phone. She had hit record the moment Danielle raised her voice. She had captured the slap. She had captured the shove. She had captured the sound of the plate breaking. She had captured my father saying, "If you don't like how things are in this house, you can leave." She had captured the blood on the floor and the $20 being shoved into my hand. She stood there in the dark, her hand trembling, watching through the screen as her cousin was thrown out like garbage. She wanted to scream. She wanted to run out and help. But fear froze her. She was 22, but she was small, and Rick's anger terrified her. So she did the only thing she could do. She saved the video. She hit stop and shoved the phone deep into her pocket. Outside. I sat down on the cold concrete steps. I unwrapped the scarf from my backpack, a cheap wool thing, and wrapped it tightly around my wrist. The white wool turned red almost instantly. I looked at the house. The kitchen light clicked off. They had gone back to bed. They had thrown me out, cleaned up the blood, my blood, and gone back to sleep. I stood up. My knees were shaking. I put on my coat. I slung my backpack over one shoulder. I walked down the driveway, past Landon's silver car, past the manicured lawn. I walked out onto the street. I did not look back. I walked toward the bus stop at the edge of the neighborhood. I did not know where the bus would take me. I did not know if a bus would even come. But as I walked, the cold air clearing the fog in my head, one thought crystallized in my mind. It was sharper than the ceramic shard that had cut me. I will never beg for food again. I clutched the bloody $20 in my hand. It was the last money I would ever take from them, and it was the seed money for an empire, though I did not know it yet. All I knew was that I was bleeding, I was cold, and I was finally, terrifyingly, free. The walk to the bus stop on Route 57 felt less like movement and more like a slow drift through deep water. The night was vast and indifferent. The streetlights of Maple Glen hummed overhead, casting pools of sickly orange light on the pavement, illuminating the cracks in the asphalt where weeds had fought their way through. I clutched my backpack to my chest like a shield. My left arm was throbbing, a dull, rhythmic ache that radiated from my wrist up to my elbow. The cheap wool scarf I had wrapped around the cut was soaked through, stiff and sticky with drying blood. I could feel the cold seeping through the thin soles of my work shoes, numbing my toes. I reached the shelter. It was not much of a shelter, just a corrugated metal roof over a metal bench, graffitied with the names of lovers who had probably broken up years ago. The wind whipped around the plastic sides, carrying the smell of exhaust and damp earth. I sat down. The metal bench bit into my thighs through my thin uniform pants. I opened my wallet with my good hand. Inside, nestled next to my student ID, were $12.40, plus the $20 bill Danielle had shoved at me, now stained with a rusty brown thumbprint of my own blood. $32.40. That was my net worth. It was not enough for a motel room. Even the seediest place on the highway charged $59 a night. It was not enough for a train ticket to the city. It was barely enough for a few meals, if I was careful. I pulled out my phone. The battery icon was a thin red sliver. 6%. I scrolled through my contacts. Ava. I could call Ava, but shame, hot and suffocating, rose in my throat. What would I say? My parents threw me out because I ate a piece of pizza? It sounded ridiculous. It sounded like something a child would say. And I was so tired of feeling like a child. I was 20 years old. I was supposed to be able to handle things. I stared at the black screen of the phone, seeing my own reflection in the glass. My eyes were swollen, red-rimmed and hollow. My hair was a mess, escaping from the ponytail I had tied for work. I looked like a ghost. I looked like someone who had been erased. I realized then, with a clarity that cut through the pain, that this was not about the pizza. It had never been about the pizza. The pizza was just the excuse. It was the trigger they had been waiting for. They did not hate me because I was hungry. They hated me because I was still there. I was the leftover from a previous life, a reminder of a wife who had died and a responsibility my father no longer wanted to carry. I was an inconvenience to their perfect, nuclear family narrative. I opened the camera app. I switched it to video. I did not know why I did it. Maybe I wanted proof that I existed. Maybe I needed to look myself in the eye. I pressed record. "If you ever make it out of this," I whispered to the screen, my voice cracking. "Remember this night. Remember the cold. Remember the blood on your sleeve. Remember who didn't come after you. Do not let them rewrite this later. Do not let them tell you they did it for your own good. They did it because you were in the way." I stopped recording. 2% battery. The phone screen went black. It died in my hand, turning into a useless brick of glass and metal. I put it away. I was truly alone now. No connection to the world. No lifeline. I remembered the small first aid kit I kept in the front pocket of my backpack. I was clumsy, always getting paper cuts or scraping my knuckles at the sandwich shop, so I kept a few basics. I pulled it out. Under the flickering orange light of the street lamp, I unwrapped the bloody scarf. The sight of the cut made my stomach turn. It was ugly, jagged, the edges white and gaping, but the bleeding had slowed to a sluggish ooze. I used a bottle of water from my bag to rinse it. The cold water stung so badly I hissed through my teeth, tears leaking from the corners of my eyes. I patted it dry with a clean tissue, my hands shaking. Then, I wrapped it tightly with gauze and secured it with medical tape. It was a crude job. A nurse would have frowned at it, but as I taped the end down, I felt a strange flicker of pride. I had hurt myself, and I had fixed myself. I did not need Danielle to bring me a Band-Aid. I did not need Rick to drive me to the doctor. I was my own doctor. I was my own parent. A rumble in the distance grew louder. Headlights swept across the darkness. Blindingly bright. A bus. It was the Night Owl line, the one that ran up and down the highway connecting the small towns to the industrial district of Riverton. It hissed to a halt in front of me, the doors folding open with a pneumatic sigh. The driver was a heavy-set man with a thick beard and eyes that looked like they had seen everything. He looked at me, a girl sitting alone in the dark with a backpack and a bandaged wrist. He did not ask if I was okay. He probably knew the answer was no. "You getting in?" he asked. His voice was gravelly but not unkind. I stood up. My legs felt heavy, like they were filled with lead. I looked back toward the direction of Sycamore Lane. The house was invisible from here, hidden behind rows of other identical houses, behind the illusion of safety. If I got on this bus, there was no going back. If I stayed, I could… What? Sleep on the bench? Walk back in the morning and beg for forgiveness? Apologize for being hungry? No. I walked up the steps. I shoved 2 crumpled dollar bills into the fare box. "Where to?" the driver asked. "I don't know." I said honestly, "Just away. End of the line." He nodded. He didn't question it. He tore off a transfer ticket and handed it to me. "Keep that," he said. "It is good for 4 hours." I walked down the aisle. The bus was nearly empty. A man in dirty coveralls was sleeping in the back row, his head resting against the window. A woman with a cleaning cart sat near the middle, reading a paperback novel. I chose a seat on the right side, near the window. I sat down and pulled my backpack onto my lap, wrapping my arms around it like a life preserver. The bus lurched forward. The engine roared, a deep mechanical growl that vibrated through the floor and into my bones. We passed the grocery store where Danielle shopped. We passed the high school where Landon was a star and I was a shadow. We passed the library where I had taught myself to code. I watched Maple Glen slide away. The houses became fewer. The streetlights became sparse. The darkness of the highway swallowed the town. I touched the bandage on my wrist. It throbbed. A steady drumbeat of pain that kept me awake, kept me sharp. The last slice. The phrase echoed in my head, but it sounded different now. It didn't sound like an accusation. It sounded like a challenge. I closed my eyes and leaned my head against the cold glass of the window. One day, I thought, the words forming a silent vow in the darkness of my mind. One day, I will never have to ask for the last slice. I will never have to ask if anyone is saving it. I will never have to wait for permission to eat. I will own the kitchen. I will own the oven. I will own the table and every chair around it, and nobody will ever tell me I don't belong there. The bus sped up, merging onto the highway. The lights of passing cars streaked across my face. Red, white, like a strobe light illuminating a transformation. I was not Lauren the daughter anymore. I was not Lauren the stepchild. I was just Lauren. And for the first time in my life, that was enough. The camera of my mind pulls back, leaving the bus as a small glowing rectangle moving through the vast American night, and dissolves into the bright, sterile white of a commercial kitchen 10 years later. The bus ride ended in Riverton. It was a place that felt less like a city and more like a bruise on the landscape of Ohio. It was an industrial hub where the factories had long since rusted shut, leaving behind a skeleton of brick warehouses and a population that looked perpetually tired. I stepped off the bus at 11:55 at night. The air here tasted different than in Maple Glen. It tasted of diesel and wet cardboard. The bus station was a concrete box with fluorescent lights that buzzed like trapped flies. I had nowhere to go. I walked to the waiting area. The plastic chairs were bolted to the floor in rows of 4. They were designed to be uncomfortable, with hard ridges specifically molded to prevent anyone from lying down. Hostile architecture. I would learn to call it later. At that moment, I just called it cruel. I sat upright, hugging my backpack against my chest. My wrist throbbed beneath the bandage, a steady, rhythmic reminder of why I was here. I watched the security guard make his rounds. He looked at me, his eyes lingering on my sandwich shop uniform and the dark circles under my eyes. But he kept walking. Maybe he saw that I was just a kid, Maybe he just did not care as long as I did not cause a scene. I did not sleep. I do not think you can really sleep when your entire life has just evaporated. I dozed in shallow, terrified bursts, waking up every time the automatic doors slid open to let in a gust of freezing wind. When the sun came up, it was a pale, watery gray. I went to the station bathroom. I washed my face with gritty pink soap and dried it with paper towels that felt like sandpaper. I looked in the mirror. I looked like a runaway. I looked like trouble. I spent that first day walking. I walked until my feet blistered in my cheap work shoes. I went to 3 diners, a gas station, and a grocery store. The conversations were all identical. "We are hiring," the manager would say, looking at my resume, which was just a handwritten list of my grades and my sandwich shop experience, "but we need a permanent address for the tax forms." "I am staying with a friend nearby," I would lie. "Okay, bring in a utility bill with your name on it, or have your friend sign an affidavit of residence," they would say. And that would be the end of it. The catch-22 of poverty. You cannot get a job without a home, and you cannot get a home without a job. By 4 in the afternoon, I was starving. I had eaten a vending machine packet of crackers for breakfast. I had $12 left, and I was terrified to spend even a penny of it. I found myself standing in front of a converted warehouse on the edge of the industrial district. A hand-painted sign above the loading dock read, "Heartline Pantry, Community Food Bank." It did not look like a business. It looked like a hive. People were moving in and out, carrying boxes. A truck was backing into the bay, its reverse beep piercing the air. I walked in. I did not go to the front door where the line of people waiting for food wrapped around the block. I went to the loading dock. A woman was standing there with a clipboard. She was in her 50s, wearing a heavy flannel shirt and steel-toed boots. She had gray hair pulled back in a severe bun and a face that looked like it was carved out of granite. "I am looking for work," I said. "I do not have an address, but I am strong, and I can lift things." She looked at me. She looked at my bandaged wrist. She looked at the desperation I was trying so hard to hide. "We are a non-profit," she said. Her voice was like dry leaves. "We rely on volunteers. We cannot pay you." "I do not need money today." I said, "I need a place to be. If I work, can I sleep here? Just for a few nights? Until I figure things out?" She studied me for a long moment. She was assessing risk. Was I an addict? Was I a thief? Was I running from the cops? "I can give you $5 an hour under the table for unloading," she said finally. "And you can sleep on the sofa in the back office. But you have to clean the bathrooms and sweep the warehouse floor every night after everyone leaves. And if you steal so much as a can of beans, I will call the police myself." "Deal," I said. Her name was Mrs. Gable. She did not smile, but she gave me a bottle of water and a pair of work gloves. That is how I survived the first week. Heartline Pantry was a chaotic ecosystem of charity. Food arrived in unpredictable waves. A local supermarket would donate 3 pallets of near-expired yogurt in the morning. A bakery would drop off 50 loaves of day-old bread at noon. A farm would send a truckload of bruised apples in the evening. My job was to move it. I lifted boxes until my arms shook. I stacked cans until my fingers were raw. At night, when the volunteers went home and Mrs. Gable locked the front gates, I swept the concrete floors. I slept on a lumpy beige sofa in the office, surrounded by filing cabinets. It smelled of dust and old coffee, but to me, it smelled like safety. But as I worked, I started to see something else. I saw the waste. It was heartbreaking. It was worse than the hunger itself. One Tuesday, a truck arrived with 20 crates of fresh spinach. It was beautiful, green, and crisp, but the pantry was already full of kale that had come in the day before. The volunteers, well-meaning retirees who moved at their own pace, pushed the spinach to the back of the cooler to make room for sorting the kale. By Friday, the spinach had turned into a slimy black sludge in the bottom of the bags. 20 crates, gone. I watched Mrs. Gable write it off on her clipboard with a sigh. Spoilage. Another day. We received a donation of 500 frozen turkeys from a corporate charity drive. It was incredible, but the freezer broke down 2 hours later because it was overstuffed and the air circulation was blocked. We had to throw them all away. I stood by the dumpster, watching the volunteers toss the thawing birds into the trash. I felt a physical pain in my chest. This was not just food. This was someone's dinner. This was the last slice for 500 families, and we were throwing it away because of bad physics and poor planning. I started carrying a notebook. It was a small, spiral-bound thing I found in the office supply drawer. I began to write things down, not feelings, data. Tuesday, 10 a.m. Delivery from Supermart. Dairy products. Expire in 3 days. Wednesday, 2 p.m. Heavy volunteer shift. Sorting capacity high. Thursday, 9 a.m. Low volunteer shift. Backlog created. I tracked the trucks. I tracked the expiration dates. I tracked the time it took for a box of cereal to move from the loading dock to the client's hands. I saw the patterns. The supermarket donations always arrived at 11, right when the pantry was busiest with clients, causing a bottleneck in the hallway. The volunteers always prioritized stacking cans because they were easier to handle, leaving the perishable produce to sit on the warm dock for hours. We were working hard, but we were working stupid. One night, about 2 weeks into my stay, I knocked on the doorframe of the office. Mrs. Gable was sitting at her desk, buried under a mountain of paperwork. "Mrs. Gable?" I asked. She looked up over her reading glasses. "You finished the floors. Lauren?" "Yes, ma'am," I said. "I was wondering, that laptop in the corner, does it work?" She glanced at the ancient gray brick of a computer sitting on a stack of phone books. It was a donation from a law firm that had upgraded its systems years ago. "It turns on," she said, "but it is slow as molasses. Why? You want to play solitaire?" "No," I said. "I want to make a spreadsheet." She looked at me curiously. "Go ahead," she said. "Just do not download any viruses." That night, I did not sleep. I booted up the machine. It made a grinding noise, and the screen flickered. But it worked. I opened Excel. I started to build a model. I input the data I had been collecting in my notebook. I created columns for arrival time, perishability score, processing time, and distribution priority. I realized that if we simply color-coded the boxes on the dock, red stickers for perishables, green for canned goods, we could direct the volunteers to the red boxes first, regardless of where they were in the stack. I realized that if we asked the supermarket truck to come at 9 instead of 11, we could have the perishables sorted and in the coolers before the clients arrived. I created a simple schedule, a flow chart. It was not fancy code, but it was logic. It was order imposed on chaos. The next morning, I showed it to Miguel. Miguel was the head volunteer in the kitchen. He was a retired line cook, a man with burn scars up his arms and a laugh that sounded like gravel in a blender. He was the one who made the hot soup we served to the homeless at lunch. He was also the only person who shared his own lunch with me without making it look like charity. He was chopping onions at the stainless steel table. I put my printed spreadsheet next to his cutting board. "What is this?" he asked, wiping his hands on his apron. "It is a plan." I said, "Look, if we move the staging area to the west wall, we save 20 steps per box, and if we prioritize the leafy greens before the root vegetables, we reduce spoilage by 30%. Miguel squinted at the paper. He traced the lines I had drawn. He looked at the numbers. He did not dismiss me. He did not tell me I was just a girl who swept the floors. He looked at the plan with the eyes of a man who had spent 40 years in professional kitchens, where timing was everything. He walked over to the loading dock. He looked at the west wall. He paced out the steps. 1, 2, 3. He came back to me. He looked at me for a long time. Then he smiled. It was a real smile, one that reached his dark eyes. "You know, kid," he said, "most people come here and they see hunger. They see sad stories." "What do you see?" I asked, suddenly feeling shy. He tapped the spreadsheet with a calloused finger. "You see a plumbing problem, he said. "You are not just trying to save food. Lauren, you are saving time. And in this business, time is more expensive than the food." That sentence hit me harder than any compliment I had ever received. You are saving time. That afternoon, Miguel helped me convince Mrs. Gable to try my system, just for one day. We said, it was chaos at first. The volunteers were confused. Why were we moving the tables? Why were we putting stickers on boxes? But by noon, the rhythm changed. The loading dock cleared. The perishables were in the cooler by 10:30. The line of clients moved faster because the bags were pre-packed based on my inventory list. At the end of the day, there was no black slime in the spinach bags. There were no wasted turkeys. The dumpster was empty. Mrs. Gable stood on the dock, looking at the clean floor. She looked at me. "You did this," she asked. I nodded. "It is just logic," I said. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a key. "This is for the back door," she said, "so you do not have to wait for me to let you in at night." It was not a promotion, it was not a raise, but it was trust. That night, lying on the lumpy sofa, I stared at the ceiling. I listened to the hum of the refrigerator that was now organized, efficient, and full of food that would actually reach people's stomachs. I realized something profound. Back in Maple Glen, my stepmother had punished me for taking the last slice because she believed resources were scarce. She believed that if I had something, it meant someone else, her son, had less. It was a zero-sum game. But here, I saw that scarcity was often an illusion created by inefficiency. There was enough food. There was plenty of food. The problem was not the amount. The problem was the flow. If I could fix the flow, I could create abundance. I looked at the old laptop glowing in the corner. I was still homeless. I was still wearing a uniform from a job I had walked out on. I still had no family. But for the first time since the night at the bus stop, I did not feel like a victim. I felt like an engineer. I fell asleep that night dreaming of grids. I dreamed of lines of light connecting farms to tables, trucks to shelters, surplus to hunger. I dreamed of a world where no one had to ask if they were allowed to eat, because the system was smart enough to feed them before they even asked. I was falling in love, not with a person, but with a solution. And this love, I knew, was something Danielle could never slap out of my hand. The apartment was located above a 24-hour laundromat called Suds and Duds on 4th Street. It cost $450 a month, paid in cash. It was not really an apartment in the traditional sense. It was a single room with a sloped ceiling that forced me to duck whenever I walked near the window. The floorboards vibrated constantly with the spin cycle of the industrial washing machines downstairs, a low mechanical hum that became the soundtrack of my life. In the summer, the heat from the dryers rose up through the floor, turning my room into a sauna that smelled of fabric softener and bleach. But it had a lock on the door. It had a key that was mine, and for the first time in my life, nobody else had a copy. I moved in with a mattress I dragged from a thrift store and a desk I salvaged from a dumpster behind an office building. I set up my command center in the corner where the Wi-Fi signal from the coffee shop across the street was strongest. My life split into 2 distinct shifts, from 8 in the morning until 4 in the afternoon. I was the warehouse manager at Heartline Pantry. Mrs. Gable had promoted me, which came with a $2 an hour raise in the title, though the work was still heavy lifting and inventory management. But from 6 in the evening until 2 or 3 in the morning, I was a student of the invisible world. I used the old gray laptop Mrs. Gable had let me keep. It was slow, prone to overheating, and missing the E key, so I had to press the little rubber nub hard to make it register on that machine. I built my education. I could not afford to go back to university. I still owed tuition for the semester I had walked away from, so I went to the University of the Internet. I found free courses on data structures from MIT OpenCourseWare. I watched YouTube tutorials on Python and SQL until my eyes burned. I lurked in coding forums, reading threads about API integrations and geospatial mapping. I was not just learning to code. I was learning to translate the chaos of the real world into a language that computers could understand. I was trying to solve the problem I saw every day at the pantry: the disconnect between the food that existed and the people who needed it. I started building a prototype. I called it Nourish Flow. The early versions were ugly. They were glorified spreadsheets with a terrible user interface. I tried to build a map that would show real-time locations of food donations, but for the first month, all it did was crash my browser. I remember one night in particular. It was February. The laundromat downstairs was quiet. I had been working on a routing algorithm for 6 hours. The code was supposed to calculate the most efficient path for a volunteer driver to pick up donations from 3 different restaurants. Every time I ran the script, it returned an error: syntax error, invalid argument, fatal exception. I was exhausted. My eyes were gritty. I had been living on instant noodles and adrenaline for months. I stared at the screen, at the lines of red text mocking me. I felt that familiar wave of inadequacy rising in my throat. I heard my stepmother's voice, clear as a bell. "You are just playing pretend. You are a waitress. Lauren, you are a sandwich girl. Who do you think you are?" I slammed the laptop shut. I put my head in my hands. I wanted to cry. I wanted to sleep. I wanted to give up and just accept that maybe I belonged in the background, washing dishes and moving boxes. But then I reached into my pocket. I pulled out my phone, a cheap replacement I had bought with my first paycheck. I had transferred the video file from the cloud. I pressed play. The image was grainy, lit by the harsh orange street lamp. My own face stared back at me, younger, terrified, with swollen eyes. If you ever make it out of this, remember this night. Remember who did not come after you. I watched it 3 times. I watched the fear in my eyes turn into resolve. I looked at the scar on my wrist, now a silver line against my skin. I am not that girl anymore. I said to the empty room, I am the one who comes after me. I opened the laptop. I deleted the entire block of code I had written. I started over. I typed until the sun came up over the factories of Riverton, and at 6:15 in the morning, I hit run. The screen did not flash red. A green line appeared on the map, connecting point A to point B to point C. It worked. The next step was to take it out of the simulation and into the real world. That required a test subject. I cornered Miguel in the pantry kitchen the next day. He was making a vat of vegetable soup, humming a mariachi tune. "Miguel," I said, "you have friends in the restaurant business, right?" He looked at me, raising an eyebrow. "I know everyone in the restaurant business. Kid, why?" "I need a guinea pig," I said. I opened my laptop on the stainless steel counter. I showed him the interface. It was simple. A button for "I have food" and a button for "I need food." I explained the concept. A restaurant has 10 pounds of leftover lasagna at closing time. Instead of throwing it out, they open the app. They tap the button. The app alerts a registered volunteer driver nearby. The driver picks it up and delivers it to a shelter that has signaled they are low on meals. No phone tags, no paperwork, just a seamless flow. Miguel wiped his hands on a towel. He stared at the screen. "You think this will actually work?" he asked. "It works on the computer," I said, "but the computer does not have traffic or angry chefs." Miguel nodded. He untied his apron. "Let's go see Sal," he said. Sal owned a small Italian bistro 3 blocks away. He was a loud, large man who hated waste but hated technology even more. Miguel talked him into it. "Just try it for 1 week. Sal," Miguel said, "if it is a hassle, we stop. But the kid, she is on to something." Sal grumbled but agreed. I installed the app on his dusty office tablet. I set up a receiver account on the pantry's computer. For 3 days, nothing happened. Then on a Tuesday night at 9:30, my phone buzzed. New donation alert. Sal's Bistro. 12 portions of chicken parmesan. Pickup required within 30 minutes. I was in my apartment. I stared at the notification. It was real. The code was talking to the world. I did not have a volunteer network yet. I was the network. I grabbed my coat and ran down the stairs. I jumped into the old beat-up Honda Civic I had bought for $500 a month prior. I drove to Sal's. Sal handed me 2 aluminum trays, steaming hot. "It works." "Huh?" he said, looking surprised. "It works. Sal," I said, grinning like a fool. I drove the trays to the night shelter on the other side of town. The intake coordinator, a tired woman named Beatrice, looked at the trays. "Hot food?" she asked. "Usually we just get cold sandwiches at this hour." "Chicken parm," I said, "courtesy of the grid." I watched the men and women in the shelter line up. I saw the steam rising from the plates. I saw a man close his eyes as he took a bite. A moment of pure, simple comfort in a hard life. I walked back to my car. I sat in the driver's seat and gripped the steering wheel. I did not cry. I started laughing. It was a wild, breathless laugh. I had done it. I had moved a resource from where it was unwanted to where it was desperate. And I had done it with lines of code I wrote in a room above a laundromat. 2 weeks later, I received an email. It was from the director of a local homeless outreach program. Subject: Your system. Dear Lauren, we have been using the beta version of NourishFlow that Miguel shared with us. Last week, we were able to secure 300 pounds of fresh produce from a local grocer that would have otherwise been dumped. This is the most efficient month we have had in 5 years. Thank you. This changes everything. I printed that email. I taped it to the wall above my desk. It was my diploma. It was my validation. It was the proof that I was not just a survivor. I was an architect. It was time to make it official. I took a morning off work. I put on my best blazer, a thrift store find that I had tailored myself to fit perfectly. I went to the county courthouse. I filled out the paperwork for a legal name change. The clerk looked at the form. "You are changing your last name?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "To West?" "Yes." "Is there a family reason?" she asked, bored, stamping a document. "No," I said. "No family, just a direction." I walked out of the courthouse as Lauren West. I had chosen the name because the sun sets in the west. It is where the day ends. It is where you go when you are leaving the past behind. I was done looking back at the sunrise in Ohio. I was moving forward, into the unknown, into the evening where the work gets done. I was no longer Lauren, the daughter of Rick. I was no longer the stepdaughter of Danielle. I was a sovereign nation of one. My success was starting to make noise. The local business journal ran a tiny blurb about the tech-savvy pantry worker and her app. I did not use my old name, but the photo was there. A few days after the article appeared, my phone buzzed with a direct message on a social media platform I barely used. It was from a user named Blue Sky Ava. I stared at the screen, my heart doing a strange stutter step. "I know you do not want to hear from me yet," the message read, "and I respect that. I won't ask where you are. But I saw the article. I recognized the code on the screen behind you. I always knew you would build something big. I am so proud of you. Lauren, just wanted you to know that someone from home is cheering for you." I read it 10 times. I typed a reply. "Thank you." Then I deleted it. I typed, "I miss you." Then I deleted that too. I could not open that door, not yet. The draft coming from that side of my life was still too cold. But I did not delete the message. I took a screenshot and saved it in a folder on my laptop titled Fuel. By the time I was 25, NourishFlow Grid had expanded beyond Riverton. I had secured a small grant from a tech incubator. I quit my job at the pantry, with Mrs. Gable's blessing and her as my first official client, and focused on the company full-time. I rented a real office. It was a single room in a shared workspace downtown, with exposed brick walls and a coffee machine that actually worked. I hired my first 2 employees. Kevin was a lanky 19-year-old hacker who could write Python in his sleep. Sarah was a former logistics manager for a trucking company who wanted to do something that mattered. On their first day, we stood in the empty office. I had bought 3 desks from IKEA and assembled them myself. "So," Kevin said, looking at me, "what is the goal, boss? Global domination?" I looked at the map on the wall. I had stuck pins in every city where food was being wasted while people went hungry. It was a lot of pins. The goal, I said, is that nobody waits for the last slice. The goal is that the slice finds them. I sat down at the head of the table, my desk, my chair, my company. I touched the scar on my wrist, hidden under the cuff of my blazer. It was no longer a wound. It was a reminder of the price of admission. I had paid for this seat in blood, and I was going to make sure it was worth it. I opened my laptop. "Let's get to work," I said. And we did. By the time I turned 29, the world had decided I was a prodigy. It happened fast, the way a brush fire catches in dry brush, fueled by a profile piece in a national business magazine. The headline read, "From the Last Slice to Feeding Thousands: How Lauren West Digitized Hunger." The article was glossy. It featured a photo of me standing in the NourishFlow Grid server room, arms crossed, looking serious and visionary in a tailored blazer. The journalist had loved the origin story I gave him, the abridged version. I told him about being a broke student. I told him about the night I realized the inefficiency of food distribution. I told him about the bus ride to Riverton. I did not tell him about the slap. I did not tell him about the blood on the linoleum or the stepmother who threw a coat at my head. I let the world believe my drive came from a generic, noble desire to do good, rather than a specific, burning need to never be powerless again. Success creates its own gravity. Once the article hit the stands, the contracts started landing on my desk with a heavy, satisfying thud. The biggest one came in April. A massive storm system had stalled over the Gulf Coast, flooding 3 states. Traditional supply chains shattered. Trucks were getting lost. Shelters were running out of water while warehouses 2 towns over were sitting on pallets of bottled hydration they could not move. The Federal Emergency Management Agency called us. They did not want to buy our software. They wanted to rent our brain. We deployed the NourishFlow algorithm. Within 6 hours, we had rerouted 40 truckloads of perishable supplies from flooded depots to accessible high ground. We moved baby formula, canned goods, and medical supplies through back roads that our system identified as passable. We saved food, we saved time, and according to the reports that came in later, we saved lives. That was the tipping point. 2 months later, I stood in my office on the 34th floor of a glass tower in Harborview City. The view was panoramic. I could see the harbor, the steel-gray water dotted with cargo ships, the arteries of the highway system pulsing with red and white lights. My CFO, a sharp woman named Elena who terrified most of the board members, had just walked out of the room after delivering the news. A venture capital firm from Silicon Valley had put an offer on the table. They wanted to lead our Series C funding round. The valuation they placed on NourishFlow Grid was staggering. $80 million. I stood by the window, pressing my hand against the cool glass. 80 million. I thought about the $12.40 in my wallet the night I sat at the bus stop. I thought about the $20 bill stained with my own blood. I thought about the way Danielle had looked at me when she handed it to me, as if she were paying off a pest to leave the premises. I should have felt triumphant. I should have popped the champagne that was sitting in the mini-fridge. But as I looked at the city lights, I felt a strange, hollow ache in the center of my chest. It is lonely at the top of the mountain when you have had to cut the rope to get there. I turned back to my desk. My computer monitor was a massive curved screen displaying the real-time grid, a map of North America pulsing with thousands of little green dots. Each dot was a food rescue in progress. Each dot was a meal that was not going into a dumpster. A notification chimed. It was a personal email, not a work email, which was filtered by my assistant, but a message sent to the old Gmail account I had created back in the library in Maple Glen. I rarely checked it. It was mostly spam and old newsletters, but the name on the notification made my breath catch in my throat. Ava Miller. The subject line was simple. The truth about the money. My hand hovered over the mouse. Ava. I had not replied to her message 2 years ago. I had let her exist in the silence, just like I had let the rest of them. But she had kept writing, sending small updates I never acknowledged. This was different. This felt urgent. I clicked open. Lauren. I know I'm the last person you want to hear from. I know you have built a fortress around your life, and I respect that. I see you on the news. I see what you are doing. It is incredible. But something has been eating at me for years. It rots me from the inside out, and I cannot keep it quiet anymore. Not when I see them living their lives like nothing happened. I have footage. You probably do not know this, but I was awake that night. I was in the hallway. I recorded what happened in the kitchen. I have the slap. I have Rick telling you to leave. I have kept it on every phone I have owned since I was 20. Terrified to use it, but terrified to delete it. But that is not why I'm writing today. That is just the violence you know. I am writing about the violence you do not know. Last month, I was helping Grandma clear out her attic before she moved to the assisted living facility. I found a box of your mom's old papers. Julia's papers. Lauren, there was a college fund. I stopped reading. The room went silent. The hum of the server rack in the corner seemed to fade away. A college fund? I scrolled down, my eyes devouring the text. Your mom started it when you were born. She put money aside every month. Grandma told me it was nearly $40,000 by the time Julia died. It was in a trust, supposed to be released to you when you turned 18. I found the bank transfer records in the box. Danielle moved it. She forged a release form. I have the document right here. She signed as the trustee, claiming hardship withdrawal for family emergency 3 weeks before Landon started community college. She moved the bulk of it into a joint account she shared with Rick. Then, she moved it again, to the dealership where they bought Landon's car, and to the bursar's office at his college. They did not just kick you out. Lauren, they financed Landon's life with your mother's money. They called you a leech while they were bleeding you dry. I sat back in my ergonomic chair. I felt dizzy. The room spun slowly. It was one thing to be unloved. It was one thing to be treated as a second-class citizen in your own home. I had accepted that. I had processed that. But this was theft. This was calculating, predatory theft. Danielle had stood in that kitchen, wearing her silk robe, calling me selfish for eating a slice of pizza, while she drove a car bought with my mother's legacy. Rick had told me I was the responsible one, who didn't need help, while he signed off on draining the only safety net my mother had left me. Rage, cold and white-hot, flooded my veins. It was not the shaky, tearful anger of the girl at the bus stop. It was the precise, weaponized anger of a CEO who has just discovered embezzlement. I looked back at the email. There is a family reunion coming up, the 10-year anniversary of the Maple Glen Community Church expansion, the big social event of the season. Rick and Danielle will be there. They are on the planning committee. They love playing the pious, perfect couple. I am going, and if you come, I can show you everything in person. I will bring the laptop. I will bring the papers. You deserve to look them in the eye and know exactly what they stole. It is next Saturday. The invitation is attached. Please, Lauren, come home, not to forgive them, but to bury them. Ava. I stared at the screen for a long time. My first instinct was to call my lawyer. I had a team of pit bulls on retainer now. I could sue them. I could drag them into court and flay them alive with subpoenas and forensic accounting. I could destroy their credit, their reputation, and their little suburban life with a snap of my fingers. But a lawsuit would take years. It would be quiet. It would be settled in back rooms with non-disclosure agreements. That was not enough. They had humiliated me. They had thrown me out like trash. They had erased me. I stood up and walked back to the window. I looked down at the city. I did not want to just sue them. I wanted to reveal them. But going back to Maple Glen, the thought made my stomach turn. I had sworn I would never go back. I had sworn my road led away from that door. Returning felt like a regression. It felt like admitting that I still cared, that they still had gravity. I paced the office. My heels clicked against the polished concrete floor. If I went back as Lauren West, the grieving daughter, I would lose. I would just be a participant in their drama. I had to go back as something else. I looked at the map on the wall again, the green dots moving across the screen. Nourish Flow Grid. I was not just a person anymore. I was an institution. I was a checkbook. I walked over to my desk and hit the intercom button. "Send Sarah in here," I said, "and tell the marketing team to hold the press release on the Series C. I have a different story I want to tell first." Sarah walked in 2 minutes later. She was my VP of operations now, a woman who could organize a military invasion if you gave her enough coffee. "What is up, boss?" she asked, sitting down. "I need you to look up an event," I said, sliding a printout of Ava's email attachment across the desk. "The Maple Glen Community Church 10th Anniversary Gala, next Saturday." Sarah picked up the paper. "It looks like a standard small-town potluck with better tablecloths," she said. "Why?" "I want to sponsor it," I said. Sarah blinked. "Sponsor it?" "Lauren, that is in Ohio. It is not exactly our target market for the new enterprise tier. I do not want to sponsor it for marketing," I said. "I want to buy the naming rights for the night. I want to turn it into a Nourish Flow event, a community food drive. We will pay for the catering. We will pay for the venue. We will provide gift baskets for every attendee." Sarah looked at me, confused. "Okay, that is generous. But why?" "Because I used to live there," I said, "and I want to make sure that when I walk into that room, I am not just a guest. I want to be the host." Sarah studied my face. She saw the set of my jaw, the cold fire in my eyes. She had been with me long enough to know when I was working on a logic problem and when I was working on a vengeance problem. "Who are we targeting?" she asked softly. "Hunger," I lied. "Just hunger." "I want the branding everywhere," I continued. "I want the Nourish Flow logo on the napkins. I want a banner behind the stage. And I want a secure room reserved for a private meeting." Sarah nodded slowly. She pulled out her tablet. "I can make that happen," she said. "If we offer a platinum sponsorship package, the church committee will probably faint with joy. They will give you the keys to the building." "Do it," I said. "Make the call today. Tell them the CEO of Nourish Flow Grid wants to honor her roots. Tell them it is a homecoming." Sarah stood up. She paused at the door. "Lauren," she said, "you know, usually when people do a homecoming, they look happy about it. You look like you are going to war." I looked at the scar on my wrist. "I am not going to war. Sarah," I said, "the war is over. I am just going back to collect the reparations." She left the room. I sat alone in the silence. I opened Ava's email again. I hit reply. "I will be there. Do not tell them I am coming. Let them think the sponsor is just a corporation. I want to see their faces when they realize the money paying for their dinner belongs to the girl they starved." I hit send. The decision was made. I was going back to the kitchen, but this time, I was not asking for a slice. I was buying the building. I spent the rest of the week in a strange fugue state. I functioned as a CEO. I signed checks. I approved code updates. I sat in Zoom meetings. But my mind was 300 miles away, in a house with vinyl siding. I went shopping. I needed armor. I went to the most expensive boutique in the city. I did not want a power suit. A suit looked like I was trying to prove I was professional. I wanted something that looked effortless, something that said I existed in a stratosphere they could not reach with a ladder. I chose a dress of charcoal gray silk. It was simple, cut on the bias, draping over my body like liquid metal. It had long sleeves that covered my wrist. High neck, open back. It whispered money. It screamed elegance. I bought shoes that cost more than my father's car. I bought earrings that caught the light like trapped stars. On Friday, the day before the event, Sarah came back into my office. "It is all set," she said. "The church committee is ecstatic. They have renamed the evening the Nourish Flow Community Gala. Your parents, Rick and Danielle West, are listed as the lead organizers on the church side. They were the ones who signed the contract accepting our sponsorship." I felt a dark, twisted amusement curl in my gut. They had signed the contract. They had accepted money from my company without even knowing it was mine. They were currently running around Maple Glen, bragging to their neighbors that they had secured a major tech sponsor, completely unaware that the hand feeding them was the one they had bitten 10 years ago. Did they ask who the CEO was? I asked. No, Sarah said. They just saw the check amount. They asked if Mr. Flo would be attending. I laughed. It was a dry, sharp sound. Mr. Flo, I repeated. No. Tell them the founder will be there to give a brief address. Keep the name off the program until the last minute. I drove myself to Ohio. I didn't take the company jet. I didn't take a driver. I wanted to drive the miles myself. I wanted to feel the distance closing. I rented a black limousine sedan. Sleek and intimidating. I drove west, watching the landscape change from the steel canyons of the city to the rolling green hills of the Midwest. I arrived in Maple Glen at 5 in the afternoon on Saturday. The town looked exactly the same gas station where I used to buy gum, the same library where I learned to code, the same bus stop on Route 57. I drove past the bus stop. I slowed down. The metal bench was still there. The graffiti had been painted over, but the shape of the shelter was identical. I felt a phantom throb in my wrist. I remembered the cold. I remembered the fear. Remember who did not come after you. I gripped the leather steering wheel. I am here, I whispered to the ghost of the girl on the bench. I came back for you. I drove to the church. The parking lot was full. I saw Rick's car, a newer model, but still modest, parked near the front. I saw Landon's car, a flashy sports coupe that looked ridiculous next to the minivans. I parked in the reserved spot marked VIP sponsor. I checked my makeup in the rearview mirror. My face was calm. My eyes were clear. I did not look like a victim. I looked like a predator who had just spotted prey. I picked up my phone. I sent one text to Ava. I am outside. I opened the car door. The air smelled of cut grass and impending rain. I smoothed the silk of my dress. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the air of the past, and prepared to exhale the fire of the future. It was time to go inside. It was time to show them what happens when the leftovers become the main course. The limousine was a black, sleek shadow gliding through the dusk of Maple Glen. It was an obscenity in this parking lot, a vehicle clearly costing more than most of the minivans and sedans parked in the rows around it. The driver, a man named Thomas, whom I paid a salary that would have made my father choke, opened the rear door. I stepped out. The gravel crunched under the soles of my shoes. I was wearing the charcoal silk dress I had bought specifically for this moment. It was severe and simple, cut to move like water against my skin. I wore no necklace, only a pair of diamond studs that caught the fading light. I looked like money. I looked like power. But inside the pockets of the dress, my palms were damp. My heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs, a traitorous drumbeat that belonged to the 20-year-old girl who had fled this town, not the 30-year-old CEO returning to conquer it. I walked toward the double doors of the Maple Glen Community Church Hall. I could hear the murmur of voices inside, the clinking of silverware, the low hum of music. Above the entrance, a large banner was suspended. Annual Community Gala, proudly sponsored by Nourish Flow Grid. Seeing my company's name, my name in a way, hanging above the door where my family was currently holding court, felt surreal. It was a Trojan horse made of vinyl and ink. I pushed the doors open and stepped into the light. The hall had been transformed. Strings of white fairy lights draped from the ceiling tiles, softening the harsh fluorescent glare of the gymnasium. Long tables were set with white linens and floral centerpieces. At the far end, a buffet line was piled high with food that I had paid for. The conversation in the room did not stop immediately, but it rippled. Heads turned. People near the door paused, their wine glasses halfway to their mouths, squinting at the newcomer. I kept my chin high. I walked further into the room, my heels clicking on the polished linoleum. I heard the whispers start. Who is that? Is that the sponsor? She looks familiar. Is that? No, it cannot be. I scanned the room. I saw faces I recognized from a decade ago. Neighbors who had watched me grow up. Teachers who had graded my papers. Shopkeepers who had sold me milk. They looked older, softer, worn down by the slow erosion of small-town life. Then, I saw them. They were standing near the head table, exactly where they believed they belonged. Rick looked older than I expected. His posture had slumped, his suit jacket pulling tight across a stomach that had expanded with age. He was holding a glass of punch, nodding at something the pastor was saying. Danielle stood next to him. She had not aged so much as calcified. Her hair was still that aggressive, chemical blonde, sprayed into an immobile helmet. She was wearing a blue sequined dress that was trying too hard to be glamorous. She was smiling, that tight, practiced smile she used when she wanted to charm a potential buyer. And Landon? He was leaning against the table, laughing loud enough to be heard over the music. He looked like a faded copy of his high school glory. He had gained weight, his face puffy, but he still carried himself with the arrogance of a man who has never been told no. He was gesturing with a beer bottle, recounting some story where he was undoubtedly the hero. They looked happy. They looked comfortable. They looked like people who had never lost a night of sleep over the daughter they had thrown away. I felt a coldness settle in my chest, freezing the sweat on my palms. A woman near me leaned into her husband. "I heard the sponsor is a West," she whispered, loud enough for me to hear. "Some big tech CEO. Do you think it is a relative of Rick's?" "Maybe a cousin?" the husband muttered. Rick never mentioned having rich family. I almost smiled. No, Rick would not have mentioned it, because Rick did not know. Suddenly, a blur of movement cut through the crowd. "Lauren!" The voice was choked, thick with emotion. Ava came running from the side of the room. She was wearing a simple black dress, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked tired, her eyes wide and anxious. But when she saw me, her face crumpled with relief. She did not care about the silk dress or the diamonds. She slammed into me, wrapping her arms around my shoulders, hugging me with a ferocity that nearly knocked me off balance. "You came," she sobbed into my neck. "You actually came." The room went silent. The name Lauren hung in the air like a dropped glass. I saw Rick's head snap up. I saw Danielle freeze, her smile faltering. I saw Landon lower his beer, squinting across the room. I hugged Ava back, one hand pressing against her spine. "Hello, Ava," I said softly. She pulled back, gripping my arms. She looked at my face, searching for the cousin she used to know beneath the makeup and the money. "We have to go," she whispered urgently. "Not here. Come with me." She grabbed my hand, before Rick or Danielle could process what was happening, before they could compose their faces or march over to demand an explanation. Ava pulled me toward a side door leading to the Sunday school classrooms. We slipped into the hallway. The noise of the party faded instantly, replaced by the smell of chalk dust and floor wax. Ava did not stop. She dragged me into the last classroom on the left, a small room with tiny chairs and a low table. She shut the door and locked it. Her hands were shaking. She walked over to a wooden desk in the corner where a laptop and a thick manila envelope were waiting. "Okay," she breathed, pacing a tight circle. "You are here. You look... God. Lauren, you look incredible. You look like you own the world." "I am working on it," I said, my voice steady. "But why did you bring me back here?" "Ava, you said you had something to show me." Ava stopped pacing. She looked at me, her expression shifting from relief to a deep, painful gravity. "I do," she said, "and I am warning you. Lauren, this is going to hurt." "I have been hurt before," I said. "I can take it." Ava opened the laptop. She typed in a password. "You think you know what happened that night?" she said. "You think it was just a fight? You think it was just Danielle losing her temper and Rick being a coward?" "Wasn't it?" I asked. Ava shook her head. "That was just the ending," she said. "That was just the excuse they needed to get you out of the house before you started asking the wrong questions." She turned the laptop toward me. On the screen, a video file was paused. "I was in the hallway," Ava said. "I woke up when Danielle started yelling. I recorded it. I have never shown this to anyone." She pressed play. The video was vertical, shaky, filmed from the shadows of a stairwell. The lighting was poor, grainy and orange, but the audio was crystal clear. I heard my own voice, young and desperate. I paid for half of this with my own paycheck. I barely ate today. I saw Danielle. She looked younger, sharper. I saw the way she lunged. I watched, feeling a phantom sting on my cheek, as the pixelated version of my stepmother slapped the pixelated version of me. I saw the pizza fly. I saw the shove. I saw myself fall. I heard the sickening crunch of the ceramic plate. Then, the camera zoomed in slightly. I saw the blood. It was dark against the white floor. I heard Rick's voice. "If you do not like how things are in this house, you can leave." I watched myself stumble out the door. Then, the video continued. This was the part I had never seen. After the door slammed shut, the camera kept rolling. Danielle stood in the kitchen, staring at the door. She did not look remorseful. She looked relieved. "Finally," she said. Her voice was cold. She turned to Rick. "That is done." Rick looked at the blood on the floor. He looked pale. "She is bleeding. Danny," he muttered, "maybe we should—" "Let her go," Danielle snapped. "She is 20. She will figure it out. Besides, we need the room. Landon needs a place to study if he's going to keep his grades up for the team." Landon laughed in the background. "I can finally move my drums downstairs." Danielle walked over to the counter. She picked up a rag and started wiping up my blood. She scrubbed it casually, like she was wiping up spilled milk. She was getting too curious. Danielle said to Rick, asking about the mail, asking about the bank statements. It was only a matter of time before she saw something. "This is better. Clean break." The video ended. I stood there in the quiet classroom. My stomach felt like it had been filled with lead. "They threw me out because I was getting curious?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Curious about what? Ava reached for the manila envelope. Her hands were trembling so hard she struggled to undo the clasp. She pulled out a stack of papers. They smelled musty, like old attics. "Your mom," Ava said. "Julia. She knew she was dying. Lauren. She knew Rick was weak. She knew he would remarry. She wanted to protect you." Ava slid a document across the desk. It was a copy of a living trust, dated 2 months before my mother died. The Julia West Education Fund. I stared at the numbers. Beneficiary: Lauren Marie West. Amount upon inception: $42,000. Terms: to be released to the beneficiary upon her 18th birthday for the purpose of higher education or housing. $42,000. In 2010, that was a fortune. That was my tuition. That was a dorm room. That was food. That was safety. "I never saw this," I said. My vision blurred. I never knew this existed. Ava slid the next paper across. It was a bank transfer record. "Look at the date," she said. August 14th, the summer I turned 18, the summer before I started college. There was a withdrawal, $35,000. Authorized by Danielle West, trustee. Reason: emergency family hardship. Beneficiary consent obtained verbally. There was no consent. I whispered. I was sleeping in the sewing room. I was scrubbing their floors. "Look where the money went," Ava said, pointing to the routing number. She placed another document next to it. It was a dealership invoice. Silver sedan. Purchase price: $12,500. Buyer: Rick and Danielle West. "And this one," Ava said, laying down a receipt from the community college bursar's office. Tuition and fees for Landon Ross, housing stipend, meal plan. I looked at the papers. I looked at the trail of numbers. They had not just favored Landon. They had cannibalized my future to feed his. Every time Danielle told me they could not afford to help me, she was lying. Every time Rick told me I was the responsible one, he was justifying the fact that he was letting his wife loot my inheritance. They bought Landon's car with my mother's dying wish. They bought Landon's meal plan while I was starving. I felt a sensation I had never felt before. It was not sadness. It was not grief. It was a clarity so sharp it felt like it could slice through steel. The scar on my wrist throbbed. I looked down at it. "They made me bleed for a slice of pizza," I said, my voice low and terrifyingly calm, but they had already eaten the whole pie. Ava was crying silently. "I found these last month," she said. "I confronted Grandma before she moved. She said she thought you knew. She said Rick told her he had given you the money and you had spent it on drugs, or a boy. That is what they told the family. Lauren, that is why nobody reached out. They told everyone you stole money and ran away." I closed my eyes. I took a deep breath. "So they stole my money, and then they stole my reputation to cover it up." "Yes," Ava whispered. I opened my eyes. I looked at the laptop. I looked at the papers. "Can I keep these?" I asked. "They are yours," Ava said. "I made copies." I picked up the documents. I folded them neatly. I did not put them in my envelope. I held them in my hand. Ava looked at me. She looked scared. "What are you going to do?" she asked. I looked at the door leading back to the party. I could hear the muffled sound of applause. The speeches were starting. "I am going to go introduce myself," I said. Ava grabbed my arm. "Lauren, be careful. They will deny it. They will make a scene." I looked at her. I smiled. It was not a nice smile. "I paid for the microphone. Ava, I paid for the stage. I paid for the food in their mouths." I walked to the door. "You stayed silent for 10 years. Ava," I said, looking back at her. "Thank you for speaking up now. You just gave me the last weapon I needed." I unlocked the door. "Lauren!" Ava called out. I did not stop. I walked back into the hallway. The air felt different now. Before, I had been nervous. Now, I was a missile. I walked toward the gymnasium doors. I could hear the MC's voice booming over the speakers. And now, we have a very special surprise. The founder of Nourish Flow Grid, the generous sponsor of tonight's feast, has arrived to say a few words. Please welcome. He paused. He was looking at the card in his hand, confused. Please welcome, Ms. Lauren West. The name rippled through the room. I pushed the double doors open. Rick was clapping politely. Danielle was looking around, confused. Landon was chewing on a shrimp. I stepped into the room. The spotlight swung toward me. The charcoal silk dress shimmered. The diamonds flashed. I saw Rick's face go slack. I saw Danielle's glass of wine tilt dangerously in her hand. I saw the color drain from Landon's face. I walked straight down the center aisle. I did not look at the guests. I looked only at the stage. I walked past my father. I saw his lips move. Lauren? I did not acknowledge him. I walked up the stairs to the stage. I took the microphone from the stunned MC. I looked out at the sea of faces. I looked at the banner with my company's name. And then, I looked directly at the head table. I locked eyes with Danielle. I held up the folded papers in my hand. Her eyes widened. She recognized the documents. She knew. I smiled. "Hello, everyone," I said. My voice was amplified, booming through the hall, echoing off the rafters. It is so good to be home. I let the silence stretch. I let the tension pull tight until it was vibrating. My cousin Ava just showed me something very interesting. I continued, my eyes never leaving Danielle's face, and in a few minutes, I am going to show it to all of you. I saw Danielle start to stand up, panic clawing at her throat. But it was too late. The microphone was in my hand. The evidence was in my grip. And for the first time in 10 years, the West family was about to learn exactly what happens when you try to starve a girl who knows how to cook. I lowered the microphone. The feedback squealed for a split second, a sharp, high-pitched noise that made half the room wince. I did not scream. I did not throw the papers into the crowd. I stood there, bathed in the spotlight, and looked at the family who had built their comfort on my erasure. If you want to keep the rest of your reputation intact, I said, my voice calm and amplified, you will meet me in the Sunday school classroom in exactly 2 minutes. If you are not there, I play the video for the room. I placed the microphone back on the stand. It clicked into place with a sound like a gavel striking a block. I walked down the stairs, ignoring the murmurs, the stares, and the confused applause from people who thought this might be some kind of avant-garde performance art. I walked straight back to the room where Ava was waiting. 2 minutes later, the door opened. Rick came in first. He looked pale, sweating through his shirt collar. Danielle followed, her face a mask of furious indignation, her sequins catching the fluorescent light in a way that looked cheap and garish. Landon brought up the rear. He looked confused, holding a half-eaten shrimp cocktail, clearly dragged along by the gravity of the situation. Ava stood in the corner, clutching the laptop. I stood behind the small wooden desk, the documents spread out before me like a general reviewing a battle map. "What is the meaning of this?" Danielle hissed, slamming the door shut. "You ambush us at our own event? You embarrass us in front of the pastor? Who do you think you are?" "Sit down," I said. I did not shout it. I said it with the voice I used to fire incompetent executives. It was a voice that brokered no argument. There were only 3 chairs. They sat. They looked like naughty schoolchildren called to the principal's office, except they were dressed in their Sunday best. "Ava," I said, "play it." Ava stepped forward. Her hand trembled, but she hit the spacebar. The sound of the video filled the small, acoustic-tiled room. "Did you just take the last slice without asking?" Danielle flinched. She recognized her own voice instantly. We watched in silence. The slap sounded louder in the small room than it had in the hallway. The sound of the plate breaking was a sharp, violent crash. The sight of my blood pooling on the linoleum made Landon look away. Then came Rick's voice. "If you do not like how things are in this house, you can leave." And then, the aftermath. The part where Danielle wiped up my blood and talked about how it was better this way because Landon needed the room for his drums. The video ended. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Danielle was the first to speak. She smoothed her dress, refusing to look at the screen. "It was a stressful night," she said, her voice high and tight. "You were hysterical. Lauren, you were screaming. I had to discipline you. It was just a slap. You are being dramatic, digging this up after 10 years. "Discipline?" I asked. I was 20 years old. "Danielle, I was an adult, and you cut me open." "You fell," she snapped. "You were clumsy." "And the money?" I asked. "Was I clumsy with that too? Or were you just efficient with your theft?" I slid the papers across the desk, the will, the trust fund records, the bank transfers, the car invoice. Rick looked at them. He picked up the copy of the trust document. His hands were shaking so badly the paper rattled. "This is not about pizza." "Dad," I said, looking him dead in the eye, "this is about the education Mom saved for me. The education that never reached me because you decided Landon needed a silver sedan more than I needed a future." Rick stared at the paper. He looked at the signature, Danielle's signature, authorizing the withdrawal. We were a family," Rick stammered, looking for a lifeline. "It all went into one pot. Lauren, times were hard. The market had crashed. We used the money to keep the house afloat, to keep us all safe." "Liar," I said. I pointed to the dates. "You bought the car 3 days after you drained the account," I said. "You paid Landon's tuition a week later. You did not use it for the mortgage. You used it to curate a life for him while you threw me out on the street with $20 and a bleeding wrist." Danielle stood up. "This is illegal," she spat. "You cannot just steal private financial records. Ava, you little spy, I will have you arrested." "Sit down." The voice did not come from me. It came from Landon. We all turned to look at him, the golden boy, the star athlete, the center of the universe. He was holding the invoice for his car, the silver sedan he had driven to campus for 2 years, the car he had bragged about, the car he thought was a reward for his hard work. He looked at the date. He looked at the amount. He looked at the video still paused on the screen, showing the blood on the floor. "That money," Landon said, his voice quiet, almost unrecognizable. "That was her money?" Danielle softened her face, turning her charm on him. Landon. Honey, it is complicated. We did what we had to do to support your dreams. You had so much potential. We just shifted resources. Shifted? Landon laughed. It was a dry, broken sound. You stole it. Mom, you kicked her out for eating a slice of pizza, and then you bought me a car with her tuition money. He looked at me. For the first time in my life, he really looked at me. Not as the annoying stepsister, not as the background noise, but as a human being who had been cannibalized to feed his ego. She is right, Landon said to his father. That money was never ours. Rick slumped in his chair. The fight went out of him. He looked old, tired, and small. Lauren, he whispered, I am sorry. I just wanted peace. You wanted peace so much you were willing to sacrifice your daughter to get it, I said. I took a deep breath. I reached into my bag and pulled out a legal document. My lawyers had drafted it that morning. I am not here because I need your money. I said, I built a company worth $80 million. I can buy this entire town if I wanted to. I do not need a cent from you. I placed the document on the table. But my mother's name deserves better than this. I uncapped a heavy fountain pen and set it down next to the paper. This is a settlement agreement, I explained. It states that you, Rick and Danielle West, admit to the misappropriation of the Julia West Trust. It states that you agree to repay the principal amount of $42,000, plus 10 years of interest calculated at 6%. I paused. But you are not paying it to me. You are paying it into a new 501c3 charitable fund called the Julia's Last Slice Scholarship. It will be administered by my legal team. The money will go to the first student in their family to attend college who has no other financial support. Danielle looked at the paper. And if we do not sign? Then I walk back out onto that stage. I said, I play the video on the big screen. I hand copies of these bank records to the pastor, the mayor, and the local press. I file a civil suit for fraud and embezzlement on Monday morning, and I spend every dime of my fortune making sure the entire state of Ohio knows exactly who you are. Danielle paled. She looked at the door. She could hear the gala outside, the people she wanted to impress, the social standing she had spent her life cultivating. Rick picked up the pen. Rick, don't, Danielle hissed. He looked at her. He looked at the video screen where he was telling me to leave. We owe her this. Danny, he said, we owe her a hell of a lot more than this. He signed. His signature was shaky, a jagged scrawl of surrender. He pushed the paper to Danielle. She stared at it. She stared at me with pure venom. She hated me not because I had won, but because I had survived. I was the mirror she could not stand to look into. She snatched the pen. She signed her name with a sharp, angry scratch that tore the paper slightly. I looked at Landon. You do not have to sign. I said, you were a child too. You benefited, but you didn't pull the trigger. Landon stood up. He walked over to the table. He took the pen from his mother. I want to witness it, he said. He signed his name on the witness line. Then he handed the pen to Ava. Ava signed below him. I picked up the document. I blew on the ink to dry it. I folded it and placed it in my inside pocket, right next to my heart. Thank you, I said. I turned to leave. Lauren? Rick said. I stopped, my hand on the doorknob. Will we see you again? He asked. I looked back at them. The tableau of a broken family sitting in a Sunday school classroom. No, I said, you won't. You made your choice 10 years ago. You chose the car. You chose the quiet life. You chose the last slice. I opened the door. You did not just leave me at a bus stop. Dad, I said, you left me out of my own future. I came back tonight to take it back in my mother's name, not in yours. I walked out. Ava followed me. We walked through the hallway, past the party that was now in full swing. I could hear glasses clinking. I could smell the roast beef. It meant nothing to me. We pushed open the exit doors and stepped out into the cool night air. The parking lot was dark, lit only by the amber glow of the street lamps. The wind was picking up, rustling the leaves of the maple trees. We walked to the limousine. Thomas, my driver, straightened up as he saw us approaching. Ava stopped by the rear door. She looked at me. Her eyes were wet. "I am sorry," she said. "I am sorry it took me 10 years. I was so scared of them." I looked at her. I looked at the cousin who had stood in the dark and pressed record when no one else would. "You showed me the truth when it cost you something." I said, "That is more than they ever did. You gave me the key to the handcuffs. Ava, you do not have to apologize for how long it took you to find it." I did not say I forgive you. Forgiveness is a heavy thing, and I was not ready to carry it yet, but I reached out and squeezed her hand. It was enough. I got into the car. The heavy door thudded shut, sealing me inside the quiet, leather-scented capsule of my success. I rolled down the window. Ava was standing there, hugging her arms against the chill. "Goodbye, Ava," I said. "Goodbye, Lauren," she whispered. I signaled Thomas. The car pulled away smoothly, the gravel crunching softly under the tires. I looked out the window as we passed the front of the church. The banner was rippling in the wind. Family dinner and community food drive, sponsored by Nourish Flow Grid. I smiled. It was a small, tight smile. I had fed them, I had funded them, and then I had broken them. It was the most expensive meal they would ever eat, and they would be paying the bill for the rest of their lives. I sat back in the seat. I did not look back at the town. I did not look back at the bus stop on Route 57 as we sped past it. I looked forward. I looked at the road stretching out ahead of me, illuminated by the high beams of my car. It was a road that led to the city, to my office, to the glowing map on my wall where thousands of green dots were moving in perfect, logical harmony. I was Lauren West. I was the girl who survived the hunger. And as the car accelerated onto the highway, merging into the fast lane, I knew one thing for certain. I would never be empty again. Justice is not watching them suffer. Justice is watching them finally see what they did, and realizing I no longer need anything from them. If someone beats you for taking the last slice, remember this: one day, you can own the kitchen, the table, and every plate on it. Tell me where you are listening from, because wherever you are, your road does not end at their door. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Please comment below and tell me which city you are listening from, because I want to know where my voice is reaching. If you enjoyed this journey, please subscribe to the Lila Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit the hype button so more people can hear the truth. Your support means the world to us.